And how's it going, everyone? Listen, there are weekends in racing where everything just kind of happens. Then there are weekends where the stories actually mean something. At Bristol, we saw 3 different races, and somehow the same theme played out every single time. The fastest trucks didn't win, the most dominant cars didn't win, and in the Cup race it came down to inches. Out at I-55 Speedway, it was a completely different kind of fight. No clean air safety net, no easy laps, just traffic, aggression, and one driver who decided he was going to take it to the win instead of wait for it. And then off the track, one schedule change just shook up a major name out of the Indianapolis 500. It might be a bigger consequence than people realize. And then to close it all out, we're going back in time when racing looked very different. And a driver who proved greatness isn't always measured in championships. This is another episode of Historic Hot Laps. Let's get into it. Alright. NASCAR at Bristol. Always something to talk about. So let's start with the Truck Series Friday night. And honestly, this race is a perfect example of the theme we talked about in the opener here. Christopher Bell gets the win, but the race wasn't about Bell for most of the night. Not even close, to be honest. This was Christian Eckes' race to lose. He led 132 laps. He was clearly the fastest truck, controlled the pace, and it felt like everyone else was just racing behind him, waiting for something to happen. And that's Bristol, right? You can be perfect for 90% of the race, and it still comes down to one restart, one little adjustment, or one moment. Bell stayed in it, stayed clean, put himself in position, and when it mattered, he capitalized on it. Top 3 for Truck Series in this one. Christopher Bell won, Christian Eckes dominant, but he comes up short, gets that second place position, and Corey Heim consistent right there again, as always. We've got to talk about Heim for a second because he didn't dominate, but he's doing exactly what championship drivers do. He's always there. No mistakes, no bad nights. Just stacking finishes. It's also worth mentioning that Caden Honeycutt started on the pole, showing speed early and hung around there for quite a while. Not a breakout win, but another sign that he belongs in the conversation. Overall, not a wreckfest Bristol race, more controlled, more strategy. That set the tone for the rest of the weekend, to be honest. Saturday, this one might be one of the most frustrating race weekends depending on who you're a fan of, because Kyle Larson absolutely owned this race. And I mean, he owned it. 230 laps led. At Bristol, that's not just fast, that's total control, and somehow he doesn't win, right? And that goes on with the theme of this, to be quite honest. But even though Kyle Larson didn't win it, Connor Zilisch definitely did. Kyle Larson came up second, finishing P2 after such a dominating race is just, I can't even imagine the frustration there. Austin Hill, he had a strong, clean top 3 run, stayed fairly out of trouble for the most part, nothing really too crazy there, but this is where the weekend really starts to tell the story, right? Larson does everything possible. He controls the race, manages the traffic, wins the long runs, but late race circumstances flip the track position and give Zilisch credit because this wasn't just luck. He did execute. Young driver on a huge stage, Bristol of all places, and he closes it. And that's a statement win. Also says something about the Xfinity field right now. It's definitely deeper than it looks. You've got young guys who, if they give them a shot late, they can definitely take it. Also, this wasn't a one-lane track. We actually saw multiple grooves working, which was awesome to see. Drivers moving around, searching for that traction, searching for clean air. That mattered late in the race. So now let's move over to Sunday. Cup Series fashion. And this is where the headline of the weekend really gets it, right? Ty Gibb gets his first career NASCAR Cup Series win. But the way it happened is what makes it all worth talking about. So real quick, your podium sits as this. You had Ty Gibbs as the winner, Ryan Blaney right there on the line, Kyle Larson dominating early, but faded back to third. So let's just start with Larson again, because this is now becoming a pattern. We all know he's great at that track. All the dirt guys are super great at Bristol. He led 284 laps, swept the stages, and he doesn't win. That's 2 races this weekend where he had the best car and didn't finish it. And this time it comes down to strategy. You had late caution, restart, tire calls. Gibbs stays out on older tires. Blaney has fresher tires behind him, and everyone's thinking, okay, Blaney's got this. Fresh tires at Bristol, that's usually the advantage. But Gibbs rushes the top lane perfectly, keeps momentum, doesn't give up the line, and they come to the line at 0.05 seconds, and that's it. That's the difference between first and second, and that's a Bristol finish. So really for the weekend, the key storylines here is this race had a few big threads running through it. Ty Gibbs getting that late race breakthrough, Larson dominating again, but not closing on either race that he was in. Strategy beats speed at the end. Let's not overlook Blaney because he did everything right. We know he's the strongest Penske car by far right now. There's no doubt about it. His pit crew is failing him horribly. We've all seen it every weekend, but he's still working his way back. By far the best driver over at that organization in NASCAR Cup Series right now. Clean race, fast car, put himself in position, just come up a little bit short. Also some quiet, solid runs worth mentioning is Todd Gilliland sneaks into the top 10. Joey Logano stayed pretty steady as always, and Carson Hocevar continues to show short track speed everywhere they go. On the flip side, a couple guys just never showed up. Christopher Bell, after winning Friday, he never had it on Sunday. William Byron, same story, just not even a factor in this race. So when you step back to look at the whole weekend, here's the story. The fastest car did not win most of these races, yet Eckes dominant, he lost. Larson was dominant, loses twice. Instead, the winners are drivers who stayed in position, managed restarts, made the right call at the right time. Between them and the team, right? It's everybody's call. And honestly, that's probably the healthiest version of Bristol we've seen in a while. Not a wreck fest, not a one-lane parade, but a race where you had to think, you had to manage your stuff, and you had to execute when it counted. And we got a first-time winner out of the Cup Series deal, so that's a big thing. Love him or not, Ty Gibbs just checked the biggest box of his career so far, and now the question becomes, is that the first of many? Is it just a moment? I mean, we'll find out soon enough, but let's move on from there. Let's get into one of the best dirt races we've seen so far this season. You have the World of Outlaws at I-55 for the Spring Classic. I believe it's called the Federated Auto Parts Spring Classic to be exact. This one had a little bit of everything you want out of I-55. You had speed, multiple grooves, aggression. More than anything, this race came down to timing and execution and traffic. Buddy Kofoid wins the Spring Classic, and this wasn't just another win. This felt like a statement because he didn't just luck into it. He went up and he took it. 5 was exactly what you hoped for. The track widened out early, the cushion built up, and the bottom never completely went away, which meant drivers had a lot of options. When you give sprint car drivers options at this place, they get aggressive, and they get aggressive fast. You weren't locked into one lane, you had to search, you had to commit, and you had to be right. Early in the feature, track position definitely mattered, but not the way that it locked down most races. Because traffic showed up quickly, and that's where the race really started to take shape. The early leaders had speed, they could control the clean air, but once they caught traffic, everything changed. Runs stalled out, lines got blocked, and the race compressed, and that's where Buddy Kofoid came alive. He was aggressive, but not reckless. He picked his moments. More importantly, he was willing to move around the track, top, middle, bottom, any of it, right? Whatever worked in the moment, he took it. And as the race went on, you could see it in building up every lap through traffic. Kofoid was a little cleaner, a little more decisive, and a little more committed. So behind Kofoid, you had David Gravel. He was right there all night, just didn't have enough for him. And Carson Macedo bringing up third, which was another strong podium win for that team. This wasn't a wait-and-see win. Kofoid drove like a guy who knew he had a car capable of winning and didn't hesitate when the opportunity showed up. At I-55, that really matters. If you second-guess a move, it's gone, and he definitely did not do that. David Gravel was exactly what you'd expect. He was fast, he was smooth, and he was consistent. He managed traffic well, he kept himself in position, and he never really made a mistake. This is one of those races where almost perfect just isn't enough. Kofoid just had that extra edge when it counted. Carson Macedo continues to do what keeps the championship hunt alive for guys. He didn't dominate. He didn't overdrive it. He just stayed in it. He stayed consistent. And at a place like I-55, that's how you end up on the podium. A few things really stood out watching this race unfold, and that was drivers who could commit the cushion late made the biggest gains. Guys who really dominated up on that top line ended up in good spots. The middle lane, they came and went, which forced constant adjustments. And traffic decided everything. There are multiple moments where it looked like the leader might pull away, and then they'd catch the wrong car at the wrong time, and everything would reset. This is the kind of race I-55 is supposed to produce, not a follow-the-leader type event, not chaos for the sake of chaos, but controlled aggression where drivers are making decisions every corner, they're setting up passes way in advance, and balancing the risk the entire time. Buddy Kofoid winning at this race says a lot, because this wasn't just about having speed. This was about reading the track, managing that traffic, which we keep mentioning, and being aggressive at exactly the right moments, and he checked every one of those boxes. More than anything, the race showed how deep the World of Outlaws is right now as a field. You've got multiple drivers who can win on any given night, and a track like I-55, that's when races like this become classic. That's the Spring Classic at I-55. All right, the next thing we need to do, we need to talk a little bit of news. And this one saddens us all the way to the heart on this one. So let's get into a big piece of news that dropped this week. It's got some real consequences for one of the biggest races in the world, and we're talking about the schedule change in Formula 2 for May and how that directly affects the Colton Herta situation and the 2026 Indy 500. So here's the situation for those that don't know. A shift in the FIA Formula 2 Championship calendar has created a direct conflict with the Indy 500 weekend. Colton Herta is now unable to compete at the Indianapolis 500 in 2026. This is a big deal, not just for scheduling inconvenience. This hits a really important moment in Herta's career because right now he's in his prime. He's not a future prospect anymore. He's not developing. He's at a point where he's experienced, he's proven, and he's capable of winning the biggest race in IndyCar. And the Indy 500 isn't a race you just assume you'll get another shot at. You don't know how many real chances you're going to have when everything lines up right. The car, the team, the speed, the moment. And for Herta, this is another one of those chances. Missing an Indy 500 in your prime is super significant. So now let's zoom out just a little bit because this doesn't just affect one driver, it actually affects the race itself. Last week we talked about car count, and the expectation was that the 2026 Indy 500 was shaping up to be a full field or at least close. But now this changes things because Herta isn't just another entry. He represents a competitive car, a legitimate contender, and a name that adds weight to the field. Take that out and suddenly the math gets tighter. The Indy 500 traditionally caps at 33 cars. That number really matters. It's part of the identity of the race. And every year now there's this quiet question, are we going to have bump day drama or just enough cars to fill the field? With Herta out of the picture, you're potentially losing one of those entries that helps you get comfortably to 33. And if another program falls through or funding doesn't show up, you're suddenly looking at a scenario where the field might not be full, or at very least the depth isn't what it could be, because the Indy 500 isn't just about the winner, it's about the field. It's about 33 cars bumping into the show, big names fighting just to make the race. If you lose that edge even a little bit, it changes the feel of the event. And this also highlights something we're seeing more and more of in motorsports, and that schedule conflicts across series are becoming a real problem. Drivers are no longer the do-it-all way they used to. You can't just jump between championships without consequences, and in this case, one of the biggest races in the world loses a top-level driver because of it. For Colton Herta, this is a missed opportunity at a critical point in his career. For the Indy 500, it raises real questions about field size, depth, and overall strength on the grid. And for the fans, it's just disappointing because you want the best drivers in the world in the biggest race in the world, and we don't know what we're going to get. So for now, we'll just keep an eye on how this develops. As we get closer to May, let's move on from here and hope for the best. All right, let's close this one out with a name that, if you know racing history, this carries a certain weight to it, and that's Stirling Moss. A driver who, depending on who you ask, might be the greatest to never win the World Championship. But if that's all you know about him, you're definitely missing the point, because Moss wasn't defined by what he didn't win, he was defined by how he raced. Stirling Moss was born in 1929 in London into a family that already lived and breathed motorsport. His father, Alfred Moss, was a racer. His mother, Aileen, raced as well. So this wasn't a hobby he picked up later. This was an environment he grew up in. By the time he was a teenager, racing wasn't a dream. It was just what you did. What made Moss different early was so simple. He could drive anything. Sports cars, touring cars, open wheel, wet, dry, fast, slow. Didn't matter. He didn't specialize in anything. He adapted to everything. That's something that's almost lost today, where drivers tend to stay in one lane. Moss didn't believe in that. If there was a race, he was in it. Let's talk Formula One because that's where most people know his name. He had 67 Grand Prix starts, 16 wins, 24 podiums, 16 pole positions, and he finished runner-up in the championship 4 times. 4 times. That's not bad luck. That's consistently being right there. And here's where the legend really starts. Moss never won a Formula One World Championship, and the most famous example of that comes in 1958. He loses the title to Mike Hawthorne by just 1 point. 1 point to separate him between victory on a full year of effort. But the reason that story matters isn't margin, it's what Moss did earlier in the season. At the Portuguese Grand Prix, Hawthorne was penalized, a decision that would have cost him crucial points. Moss went to the stewards and argued in Hawthorne's favor. He defended his rival, the penalty was reversed. Hawthorne kept the points, and those were the exact points that won him the championship. So think about that for just a minute. Moss chose sportsmanship over a guaranteed title, and that's why his legacy is just a little different. If there's one race that defines Stirling Moss, it was the Maglia 1955. This wasn't a circuit race. This was 1,000 miles on public roads across Italy. No margin for error, no runoff, just flat-out speed through towns, mountains, and open roads. Moss, driving for Mercedes-Benz, didn't just win, he dominated. He completed the race in just over 10 hours with an average speed of nearly 98 miles an hour on public roads. 1955. Let that sink in. And he had a co-driver, Dennis Jenkinson, who was reading pace notes from a scroll system they had built themselves. This was early rally-style communication. Before it was really a thing, it was innovation, bravery, and absolute commitment, all in one drive. Many still consider it the greatest single performance in motorsports history. Moss raced in what might have been the most dangerous era the motorsport had ever seen. He competed against names like Juan Manuel Fangio, Alberto Ascari, Mike Hawthorne. And here's the thing, Fangio, a 5-time world champion, once said Moss was the driver he respected the most. So that tells you everything you need to know about him. It wasn't just speed, it was feel. Moss had the ability to understand a car underneath him the way that drivers at the time struggled to describe. He could adjust mid-corner, change lines instinctively, find grip where others couldn't, and he raced hard but clean, aggressive but fair. That balance is a very rare thing. In 1962, Moss had a massive crash at the Goodwood circuit. He was in a coma for a month. When he recovered, something was different. His reactions weren't the same, and Moss, being who he was, made the decision if he couldn't be his absolute best, he wasn't going to race. He retired soon after and lost the opportunity to possibly gain that championship that he never put his hands on. So how do you measure a career like Stirling Moss with no championships but wins across multiple disciplines, one of the most iconic drives ever at the Magilla, respect from the greatest drivers in history, and a reputation for sportsmanship that's almost unmatched? Moss proves something that doesn't always show up in the record books. And greatness isn't just about titles, it's about the impact you have on your sport. It's about how you race. It's about the moments people never forget. Stirling Moss didn't need championships to become a legend because when people talk about the pure art of driving, his name always comes up. And that's going to wrap us up this week. A little shorter episode, but Bristol gave us a reminder that dominating race doesn't guarantee anything anymore. Execution's what matters. Timing matters. And sometimes being second best all day still gives you a shot at the win when it counts. At I-55, we saw what happens when the racetrack actually lets drivers race. Multiple grooves, constant decisions, and a driver who stepped up and made it happen when the opportunity was there. And when you look at the bigger picture, one schedule change and suddenly a driver in his prime is out of the Indy 500 this year. That's how tight the margins are in motorsports right now, not just on track, but everywhere else too. You think about someone like Stirling Moss, a driver who never won a world championship, but still became one of the most respected names the sport has ever seen, because at the end of the day, the sport has always been about more than just a result. It's about moments, it's about decisions, and the stories that stick with you long after the race is over. We'll be back next week with some more. Please, as always, share with a friend, like the podcast, comment, hit us up on all the socials, like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. We'll be back with a little bit more next week. We've got Long Beach coming up. We're excited for that. It's just been kind of a weird lull the last couple of weeks with the Easter break and then Formula One being, off for the war stuff going on overseas and all that, the conflicts. So it's been a little weird, but we're going to get through it. And we can't wait to see you next week. Until then, stay safe. Thanks for tuning in.